I'm pretty sure that this is the first time I've seen an alert of a rare or uncommon bird, went to find it, and actually found it. So I'm very happy. I'm also freezing. I'm gonna go home and drink a hot coffee.
The Virginia rail is a secretive marsh bird, more often detected by sound than by sight. It has a reddish bill and legs, boldly banded flanks, and a short upturned tail. Honestly, when you see one, they kind of look like a kiwi. You know what a kiwi looks like? Except they actually have functioning wings. It is a habitat generalist. It goes around probing mud and shallow waters for small fish, invertebrates, and seeds. Its compressed body, flexible skeleton, and reinforced head feathers allow it to slip through dense foliage. It is very agile on foot, and it typically escapes danger by running, although it can swim and dive using its wings. And feet and other parts, it just uses its wings to swim. These guys occupy isolated wetlands and can locally be common when conditions are good. They are monogamous, territorial, and produce a lot of offspring. And they begin their breeding season with these distinctive duetting grunts. They often build multiple dummy nests within their territory, and their young are very developed at hatching and leave the nest pretty quick. They molt twice annually, with their late summer molt leaving them temporarily flightless, which is okay. They can still run away from things, which is their MO. Although they are classified as a game species, they are rarely hunted. They're like this big. Not enough of a prize, I guess. And because there's not much hunting of it, and so there's a lack of interest in it, plus it's a pretty secretive bird, a lot of the aspects of its biology remain unknown. These rails are small, laterally compressed marsh birds, with lateral compression here just meaning like a fish. You know, you've seen those fish where they just look like a line from the front? Like that. They've got reddish tones, gray cheeks, and a long, slightly down-curved bill. That's the thing you really notice. They're proboscis. They have chestnut wings with a tiny claw on the outer wing digit, a reduced P11, and black and white banded flanks. Its legs and bill are a dullish red, and the females are just slightly smaller than the males. Although the sexes can't be reliably distinguished in the field. It's much easier actually to identify their ages based on their plumage and size rather than sex. They look pretty similar to the clapper rail and the king rail, but both of those guys are a bit bigger and a little duller, so you can usually pick out which is the Virginia rail. These guys show very little geographic variation. In fact, there's only 2 subspecies, and their plumage progresses from a glossy black natal down to their colorful adult plumage after their second pre-basic molt. So they go through a year, so they have their first year molt, and then their next one goes to their full adult plumage. And as I already mentioned, their late summer molt leaves them flightless for up to a month, which leaves them a little bit exposed, but they can still run away. Basically a Roadrunner cartoon. The Virginia rail was actually for a long time considered conspecific with the Ecuadorian rail, but they are now treated as different species actually due to large vocal differences and a complete lack of geographical overlap. Although still together with the Ecuadorian, Bogota, and Austral rails, they are considered a superspecies, which basically just means a group of related species coming from a single common ancestor that are morphologically still similar, but geographically separate. I have also learned that it sometimes means powerful mythical creatures. Not that. Comic books can try to steal our words if they want. They'll actually probably succeed. I don't know what I'm talking about. But their precise phylogenetic relationships are still unresolved due to limited molecular testing. Again, if anybody wants to study these birds, I will help. I might not be that big of a help, but I'll still help. As I said, they've only got 2 subspecies. One is paler. I sometimes really don't know what the criteria for making stuff subspecies is. Paler doesn't seem to be enough of a criteria. I'm sure there's something else that I just don't know. The Virginia rail breeds locally across North America, from southern Canada to northern Mexico, and parts of Guatemala, with breeding occurring in mid-elevation marshes that are typically warmer than Sora breeding sites, which is a bird they're often seen with. And they sort of look like, although Soras have those big ol' eyes, I don't think I could confuse them with anything. And these guys often winter near major river systems, irrigated agriculture, and warm springs, and are pretty influenced by the availability of freshwater marshes and temperature. Freshwater marshes. Freshwater marshes. That's not even a tongue twister. Why can't... There is no clear evidence of recent distribution changes, but as I said, they're a pretty secretive bird, so that could just be that we don't see them. As I said, they breed mainly in freshwater marshes, although they'll also deal with brackish and saltwater if they need to. They prefer shallow waters, moist soil or mudflats for foraging, robust emergent vegetation, marshes in early successional stages with abundant microinvertebrates, macroinvertebrates, the exact opposite, and wetlands with 40 to 70% emergent vegetation mixed with open waters or mudflats. They generally use drier parts of marshes than soras, again, their companion, and avoid areas with overly dense stems or heavy residual vegetation. And they'll readily occupy regrowing marshes as soon as enough vegetation cover is there. And in some regions, such as Maine, they prefer large wetlands, long shorelines, and beaver or human-made marshes. There's not a lot of situations where it's a toss-up between human or beaver, but this is one of those few. And these guys give a little more wiggle room during migration and wintering, but not a ton. It's still marshes. Vegetation varies a little bit, how much open water, how much cover, but it's basically just marshes for these guys. Adults do show site fidelity. There have been documented cases where adults will return to breeding sites up to 4 consecutive years, but their general dispersal patterns are not greatly understood. We know that broods stay near the nest for about a week, but then their dispersal is sort of a mystery. Also, a week is way too short. We know that these guys are capable of long-distance movements, which is aided by their adaptability to ephemeral wetlands. But where they go and why they go, who knows? Most of their populations do migrate, except some of the southern ones will stay in the same place where it's still warm. But the timing of their arrival and departure relies heavily on weather and plant abundance. And their seasonal habitat shifts are because of all the things that you'd expect: foodability, predation, and competition. And unfortunately, these guys are comparatively quiet in the late summer, which makes it more difficult to track their migration because they're fine being heard, but don't love being seen. So generally their migration is irregular and hard to track. Their post-breeding movements begin as early as July, with most northern birds leaving about late September to early October and reach wintering grounds starting in September. And for spring migration, birds leave wintering areas by late April. Late April? Early April. With males arriving to their breeding grounds about a week before females. But their major migration routes and staging areas remain unknown. So if you see a whole bunch of Virginia rails in one place eating, tell somebody. It is thought that they migrate at night, probably because we don't really see them migrate, flying low and following river valleys or level terrain. But their speed, orientation mechanics, and flocking tendencies simply remain unknown. I seriously will help. Birds commonly concentrate in large marshes before fall migration, but it seems that this is possibly due to falling water levels and not a social behavior. But once again, there is just no data on fat accumulation, migratory restlessness, hormonal cues, or photoperiod responses. We just don't know. As I said, when they are trying to eat, they go to shallow waters or mudflats. If you're looking for them, look for that sort of piper or plover stance, picking things out of the water with their long bill. And they typically feed in more open waters than where they nest, sometimes using nearby uplands. And foraging is done standing and probing rapidly and continuously with their long decurved bill, mostly active at dawn and dusk. And they use their long toes to walk on floating vegetation, and they may even climb on plants to reach their prey. And they will often probe beneath mats of vegetation and floating debris. And their diet is strongly animal-based, up to 97% during their breeding season. And their major prey includes insects and larvae, beetles, flies, dragonflies, damselflies, true bugs, caterpillars, snails and slugs, crustaceans, amphipods and crayfish, worms, small fish, frogs, and occasionally even small snakes. But as I said, they will also consume aquatic plants and seeds, particularly during the fall and winter, which only gets up to 32% of their diet ever. And once again, to compare them to their friends, the soras, they eat much more animal material, with soras typically eating in the 70% of seeds for their diet. It is hypothesized that they have a highly developed sense of smell based on the large olfactory structures that they have, but this hasn't been experimentally tested. And they also have a long ceca, which is a pouch in their large intestine, which helps break down food. Unfortunately for me, they are pretty loud birds, so one of the things we do know about them is the sounds they make, with adults having 4 main vocalizations. The grunt duet, which I mentioned, which is the most commonly heard as well, which is probably used for pair bonding and territorial interactions. The ticket call, which is repeated in early spring, which is likely made by unpaired males looking for their better half. A kicker call, which is rare but made in early spring, which is likely given by unpaired females. And the cue call, which is a sharp alarm call. And their vocal activity peaks in the spring and is most common at dawn and dusk. Couldn't be interesting there, could ya? Virginia rails. But bad weather can greatly reduce calling activity. And both sexes have a broader repertoire during courtship and breeding. And that pair duet actually happens throughout the breeding season. And it seems that individuals recognize their mate's calls. And some evidence suggests that there are actually two grunt types, a different one for the pair bonding than there is for the territorial disputes. I guess we can't tell because we're humans, not birds. And nobody's researching them. As I said, they are a running, walking sort of bird. They have strong legs that actually take up 25% of their body mass, with long toes that allow walking on floating vegetation and moving through dense marsh plants. And they'll occasionally climb on stems or shrubs, sometimes using that claw at the end of their wingtip. They rarely fly outside of migration, and they also only seem to swim and dive when avoiding predators. Allopreening and autopreening are both common for these guys, which is a thing we can relate to as primates. And modified feathers and nasal valve help protect against abrasion in dense vegetation. They also seem to roost in the same spot nightly, which was great when I was trying to find one because I knew where it would be because it was going to be there the next day too, probably. And though it actively forages at dawn and dusk, it remains active throughout the day. As I said, they are monogamous and territorial, with males performing most of the territorial chases, although females are often more aggressive than males when defending their nest and chicks. And fighting back for them includes pecking, clawing, and jumping at predators, combined with low grunts and sometimes freezing to avoid detection. And the pair bonds appear to be just for the season. Their predators include snakes, muskrats, weasels, raccoons, hawks, blackbirds, wrens, mink, coyotes, feral cats, egrets, harriers, and owls. And besides the physical aggression, submerging themselves in water, and the alarm calls that I've already mentioned, they also have a display where they run in tight circles with their wings lowered to try to get stuff to go away. Mates will build their nest together, starting just a couple of days before the eggs are laid, and construction typically lasts only 3 to 4 days, although it can continue if water levels change. And nests are these loosely woven baskets, often with a canopy of surrounding vegetation, usually built on or just above the water. And non-breeding dummy nests are also often built, either for alternate use or to trick their predators. Smart like the Roadrunner too. I'm gonna have to actually find a Roadrunner at some point. That'll make my day. Their average clutch size is actually 8 eggs, which is a lot of eggs, with northern clutches tending to have more on average. And they usually lay 1 egg per day shortly after nest construction begins. Both sexes will incubate the eggs, although females do it a bit more, and incubation lasts about 20 days. And the changeover between who's incubating happens about every 1 to 2 hours, often with a call for that exchange and occasional feeding of the incubating partner. The eggs will start pipping about 2 days before they actually hatch, and hatching itself only takes about an hour to an hour and a half per egg, and hatching is generally synchronous. And they are precocial young, which means they're very developed. They're already covered in black down, their eyes are open, and they can move somewhat weakly at the beginning, right after hatching. But they develop rapidly, and they can stand, preen, eat, and run within hours of hatching. And they can swim as soon as they dry. And they grow very quickly, with their tarsometatarsi and toes reaching adult size within 3 to 4 weeks, their juvenile plumage coming in at 2 to 3 weeks, and most chicks being able to fly at 4 to 7 weeks. Although, while the metric for being able to get up and about for a lot of birds is when they can fly, for these guys, we care about their leg bones and toe bones so that they can walk. And while adults will care for and defend chicks after they leave the nest, chicks are pretty independent and will start even feeding themselves by day 7. Again, because there hasn't been a lot of study of these guys, a lot of their statistics are unknown. We know that chick mortality is pretty high. The difference between the number of eggs and the number of chicks in a brood is pretty big. They typically have 1 brood per season, but it's poorly documented whether they could have additional broods. The relationship between age and breeding success is unknown. Juvenile survival rates is unknown. Everything is unknown, unknown, unknown. Their population density is highly variable, ranging from 0.1 to 9 pairs per hectare. It's a lot of variation. And that really seems to come down to adequate food and vegetation cover because it really prefers marshes, as I've mentioned. As long as they're in a marsh and nobody's in their nest, they're happy. So I went specifically to see a Virginia rail at Mendon Ponds Park. eBird has a rare bird alert for different counties, and I saw that somebody had seen a Virginia rail on this particular path in Mendon Ponds Park. I've done this before where I've seen a rare bird alert near me and gone, ooh, I could go find that. And this is the only time it has ever worked out for me. Either I have bad luck, or I'm just not that skilled, or I give up too soon. I don't know. I went on this fairly cold day to walk around this little pond in Mendon Ponds Park. There were only vague directions as to where to find this guy on eBird. So I ended up walking around the pond 1.5 times before I found the spot that the poster was talking about. And as I started to walk, I ran into a couple of people, as you do. There was this group of chickadees and juncos and cardinals and white-throated sparrows and American tree sparrows that I was stopping to take a picture of. And this older couple came up to me, chatting about the different kinds of birds that were there and what we were seeing. As it happens, as we were looking, a yellow-bellied sapsucker also flew over onto the tree that we were looking at. And I pointed it out. I said to the guy that was standing there chatting with me, "Oh, look, it's a yellow-bellied sapsucker." And he went, "You know, I've been called a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Ex-girlfriends." I'm not typically what you would call a social butterfly, but people that are interested in birds always have something fun for me. So after I said bye to the yellow-bellied sapsucker and who I think was his wife, I walked another 2 miles before I found the spot that I was looking for. It was this little creek coming off the pond with a little footbridge over it. That was the path. And it took me a couple of minutes of sitting there looking at this little creek, which I was pretty sure was the spot, before I saw him. Just that very distinctive look of something is running through the brush, but it's not a mammal. And so he spent a lot of time hiding from me. I've got a lot of very mediocre pictures of this guy, where you can just see a little bit of plumage here, a little bit of bill there, although I've got a couple of pretty good ones. Also, to take this photo, I was deep in the brush. Once I see a bird, I go for it, man. And so I was squatted, half in brush, with my camera, trying not to fall down the little ravine to where the creek was that he was on the edge of. I did eventually take out my video camera too, and I've got a better shot of him with my video camera than I do with my regular camera, I think. He was pretty cute. They're pretty cute, you gotta admit. And you can call them laterally compressed all you want. When they do their little squat down, they become a little fluff ball. Also, while I was trying to take pictures of him, the chickadees, who are not remotely afraid of humans, kept flying over to me and right into my camera. I don't know if they think I have something for them. I don't, but it's very distracting when I'm holding a camera like this and something keeps flying at my head. I love chickadees, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to be in the movie The Birds. So that was my Virginia rail. I had heard one once before during the summer, but it was in a marsh. Would you look at that? And it was way off in the weeds, literally. And I was not in a position where I was gonna get halfway soaked to find this Virginia rail and have Nature Center employees be mad at me. So this is the first time I've ever seen one. Remember, I am not an expert in any of this. I just go where the eBird posters tell me to go. And I'll always go wherever they tell me to go. And remember, never pass up a good marsh.